A 12-year-old boy claims to be Carlo Acutis and reveals secrets about the urn where his body lies. The first time Gabriel Moretti dreamed of dying, he woke up gasping for air, his pajamas soaked with sweat, despite the cool October breeze coming through his bedroom window. His mother found him sitting upright in bed, staring at his hands with an expression that didn't belong on a 12-year-old's face. "It was so real," he whispered when she sat beside him. I could feel it happening. My blood changing, becoming something that was killing me instead of keeping me alive." Elena Moretti assumed it was just a nightmare, but when the dreams continued for weeks, specific, detailed dreams of a hospital room in Monza, of conversations with doctors about acute promyelocytic leukemia, of a teenage boy's acceptance of his impending death, she began to worry. Gabriel had always been a sensitive child, more interested in computers and books than football. But lately, he'd started attending daily mass without being prompted, had developed an interest in photography, and spent hours creating what he called a catalog of Eucharistic miracles around the world. "It's for people who don't believe," he explained when his father asked about the project. "And if they see the evidence, maybe their hearts will open." Marco and Elena exchanged concerned glances. Neither were particularly devout, attending church mainly on Christmas and Easter. They couldn't understand where this sudden religious fervor had come from. The turning point came during his school's religious education trip to Assisi. The itinerary included all the standard destinations, but also a stop at the Sanctuary of the Spoliation in the Church of Santa Maria Maggiore, where the recently beatified Carlo Acutis was entombed. Gabriel had been quiet throughout most of the trip, taking photographs but keeping to himself. But as their group approached the glass-sided tomb containing the body of the 15-year-old Blessed, dressed in jeans, Nike sneakers, and a simple sweater, Gabriel stopped walking. "I know this place," he said, his voice barely audible. Sister Giovanna, their guide, smiled kindly. Have you visited Assisi before, Gabriel?" He shook his head slowly, his eyes fixed on the preserved body. "No, but I've been here. I mean," he hesitated, confusion clouding his features. "He's been here. I've been here. I don't understand." Gabriel pushed forward through the small crowd of students, approaching the tomb with urgency. He pressed his palm against the glass, his breathing becoming rapid and shallow. "There's something under the altar," he said, his voice changing subtly, taking on an accent that wasn't his own, the softer vowels of Lombardy replacing his Roman inflections. "Something no one knows about. I put it there before—" His words cut off as his eyes rolled back, and Gabriel collapsed onto the stone floor of the church. He woke in a small office adjacent to the sanctuary, his mother's worried face hovering above him while a doctor checked his pulse. "You fainted, Piccolo," Elena explained, brushing his hair back from his forehead. "How do you feel?" Gabriel blinked, orienting himself. "I'm okay. He trailed off, looking around the room until his gaze settled on Father Ricci, the curator of the sanctuary, who was watching him with interest. "You said something about the altar before you fainted," Father Ricci said gently. "Something hidden beneath it?" Gabriel nodded slowly, sitting up despite his mother's protests. "There's a small compartment on the right side of the base, behind the panel with the carved lily. Inside is a USB drive containing website designs that were never finished, and notes, ideas for cataloging more Eucharistic miracles." His voice grew more confident as he continued. "Yutu, the password for the drive, is Ad Jesum per Mariam 1991. To Jesus through Mary, 1991. Father Ricci's face paled. He glanced at Sister Giovanna, who had entered silently and was now standing near the door. "How could you possibly know this?" Father Ricci asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Because I put it there," Gabriel replied simply. Then, confusion flickering across his features, he corrected himself. "I mean, Carlo did. But I remember doing it." That evening, after returning to their hotel, Gabriel's parents tried to make sense of what had happened. Their son had been examined by a doctor who found nothing physically wrong. The school's psychologist suggested that perhaps he had read about Carlo Acutis online and was experiencing some form of intense identification. That would explain his sudden interest in religion and computers, Marco reasoned. Carlo was known for creating websites about Eucharistic miracles. Gabriel probably read about it online. Elena nodded, wanting to believe this rational explanation. "But how do you explain what he said about the USB drive? And that password?" Marco shrugged. "Maybe he read about it somewhere. These details could be online." But they weren't. Later that night, Elena searched the internet for any mention of a hidden USB drive in Carlo Acutis's tomb. She found nothing. In the morning, Gabriel seemed entirely himself again, eager to continue the tour of Assisi. But when Elena asked him about the previous day's events, his answer sent a chill through her. "I need to finish what I started," he said matter-of-factly. "The catalog isn't complete. There are 12 more miracles that need to be documented properly." "What catalog, Gabriel? What miracles?" "The Eucharistic miracles," he replied, looking at her as if she should understand. "It's my mission to help people believe. Technology is a gift we can use to evangelize." These weren't the words of a 12-year-old boy. These weren't Gabriel's words at all. When they returned to Rome, Gabriel immediately went to his computer and began working with a focus and skill that left his father, a software engineer, speechless. Gabriel was coding in languages he had never been taught, creating database structures that Marco himself would have struggled with. "How do you know how to do this?" Marco asked, watching Gabriel's fingers fly across the keyboard. Gabriel paused, considering the question with a furrowed brow. "I just remember," he said finally. "It's like riding a bicycle. Your body remembers even if your mind doesn't." The website Gabriel created was sophisticated and comprehensive. A virtual museum of Eucharistic miracles throughout history, complete with historical documentation and theological reflections. When Marco examined the code, he found signature techniques that were distinctly not amateur work. Meanwhile, Elena had contacted Father Ricci in Assisi. The priest had been reluctant to discuss the matter over the phone, but had finally admitted that they had indeed found a USB drive exactly where Gabriel had indicated. He had been able to open it using the password Gabriel had provided. "The contents are significant," Father Ricci said carefully. "The file dates confirm they were created by Carlo before his death. Some of the designs and ideas match perfectly with the websites he created, but these were clearly works in progress." He paused, and Elena could feel his hesitation through the phone. "Mrs. Moretti, has your son ever visited Monza or Milan? Did he ever meet Carlo Acutis?" "No," Elena replied. "We've lived in Rome all his life. Carlo died when Gabriel was not even born." There was a long silence before Father Ricci spoke again. "The bishop has requested that your family come back to Assisi. There are other tests we would like to conduct, with your permission." "Tests? What kind of tests?" "Nothing invasive, I assure you. But there are certain details about Carlo's life and work that were never made public. If your son truly has some connection to Carlo's memory, there are ways to verify this." That night, Elena found Gabriel kneeling beside his bed, fingers moving over rosary beads with practiced precision. He was murmuring prayers in Latin, perfect Latin, a language he had never studied. "Gabriel," she said softly, "where did you learn those prayers?" He looked up, his dark eyes reflecting a depth that hadn't been there before. "Mama always said the rosary was a weapon against evil," he replied. "I never taught you that, Gabriel." "Not you," he said with a small, sad smile. "Antonia." Antonia Salzano was Carlo Acutis's mother, a woman Gabriel had never met, whose name Elena was certain had never been mentioned in their home. The journey back to Assisi was quiet. Gabriel spent most of the drive staring out the window, occasionally making notes in a small journal Elena hadn't seen before. When she asked about it, he simply said he was recording ideas for the website's next phase. "There are connections between the miracles that no one has documented properly," he explained. "Patterns in how God reveals himself through the Eucharist across different centuries and cultures." Marco exchanged glances with Elena in the rearview mirror. Their son had always been bright, but this level of theological analysis was unsettling from a 12-year-old. They were met at the sanctuary by Father Ricci and an older priest with silver-rimmed glasses who introduced himself as Father Lombardi, a consultant to the Congregation for the Causes of Saints. "I specialize in cases of unusual spiritual phenomena," he explained as they settled in a private conference room. His careful choice of words wasn't lost on Elena, who tightened her grip on Gabriel's shoulder. Gabriel, however, showed no apprehension. In fact, he smiled at Father Lombardi with what looked oddly like recognition. "You wrote a paper on Eucharistic miracles in Lanciano and Buenos Aires, comparing the tissue samples," Gabriel said. "You concluded they shared the same blood type and cellular structure, despite occurring centuries apart." Father Lombardi's eyebrows rose. That paper was published in a specialized Vatican journal with very limited circulation. How could you possibly know about it?" "I read everything about Eucharistic miracles," Gabriel replied simply, then hesitated. "Or, Carlo did. It's confusing sometimes, separating what I know from what he knew." Father Lombardi nodded thoughtfully. "That's why we're here today. To understand this connection you seem to have with Blessed Carlo." He turned to Gabriel's parents. "With your permission, I'd like to ask Gabriel some questions that only Carlo Acutis would be able to answer. Private details that were never published or shared online." Father Lombardi began gently. "Gabriel, can you tell me about Carlo's daily routine? What was his typical day like?" Gabriel closed his eyes, his face relaxing into concentration. "Wake up at 6:30, morning offering prayer, then prepare for school. Daily Mass before classes. This was non-negotiable, even when traveling. School until afternoon. Then helping at the parish, working on the website, visiting elderly neighbors, or volunteering at the local shelter for homeless people and abandoned animals. And his computer work," Father Lombardi prompted. 2 hours maximum per day. That was Mama's rule," Gabriel said with a small smile. "I'd work on website coding, design, and research. I taught myself programming from textbooks and online tutorials, Java and SQL for databases, PHP for web development. HTML was just the beginning." Elena noticed the shift from third to first person, but Father Lombardi continued without commenting on it. "Can you tell me about Carlo's room in Milan? The details?" Gabriel nodded. "Posters of Jerusalem and the Holy Land on the walls, a globe on the desk, books everywhere, theology, computer science, photography guides. The computer setup had dual monitors. There was an aquarium with 3 fish. And a shelf with models of Ferraris. He grinned, because even saints can appreciate beautiful engineering. After 2 hours, Bishop Lewandowski called for a break. While Gabriel played with a puzzle in the corner of the office, the bishop spoke quietly with Anna and Tomasz. "What your son knows," he paused, choosing his words carefully. "Some of it is simply impossible for him to have learned through normal means. The details about the private correspondence between Cardinal Wojtyła and Father Stanisław Dziwisz, these were never published. The cushion Sister Tobiana made for the Pope's chair." He shook his head. This was something known only within the Pope's most private circle. For the next several weeks, Dr. Forrester spent hours with Noah, showing him unlabeled artifacts from the time period, maps of ancient Palestine, and recordings of various ancient dialects. The results were compelling enough that Dr. Forrester extended his stay, setting up a more formal research protocol with the help of Dr. Mercer. Father Lombardi made notes, his expression neutral, and his relationship with his parents. "Deep love and respect," Gabriel said, without hesitation. "Especially Mama. We didn't always agree. She worried about me spending too much time on the computer, and she didn't understand at first why I wanted to attend daily Mass, but she supported my faith once she saw how serious I was." The following weeks brought a parade of experts to examine Gabriel. The story had spread within certain circles of the Church, though the Kowalskis and diocesan officials had managed to keep it from the wider public and media. Gabriel underwent psychological evaluations, interviews with theologians, and consultations with medical specialists searching for any rational explanation for his knowledge. Over the next 3 hours, the questioning continued. Gabriel correctly identified Carlo's favorite prayer, the Rosary, his favorite saints, Saint Francis of Assisi and Saintine Fate Tietz, Dominic Savio, and even recalled specific conversations with his spiritual director about his premonition that he would die young, conversations that had never been published. But perhaps most convincing was when Father Lombardi showed Gabriel a series of photographs, some of people Carlo had known, others of strangers mixed together. "These are people from Carlo's life," Gabriel said immediately, sorting through them with confidence. "This is Father Gianni, who heard my first confession. This is Professor Nicola, my computer science teacher. This is Maria, who helped with the catechism classes." He separated out several photos. "These others are strangers. I've never seen them before." Father Lombardi nodded, visibly moved. He's correct about every single one. As the day's session concluded, Father Lombardi asked for a private word with Elena and Marco, while Gabriel remained with Father Ricci in the conference room. "What we're witnessing is extraordinary," Father Lombardi said, once they were alone in his office. "Your son has knowledge that he could not possibly have acquired through normal means." "What are you suggesting?" Marco asked, his engineer's mind still searching for a logical explanation. "That Gabriel somehow has Carlo Acutis's memories, his soul. How is that possible?" Father Lombardi sighed. "The Church approaches such matters with extreme caution. We have no doctrine that would explain the transfer of memories or specific knowledge from a deceased person to a living one in this manner." He paused. "And yet, we cannot ignore the evidence before us. Gabriel knows things that only Carlo could have known." "What does this mean for our son?" Elena asked, her voice breaking slightly. "Is he still himself? Is Carlo somehow taking over his personality?" "From what I've observed, Gabriel remains very much himself, Father Lombardi reassured her. This seems more like an addition rather than a replacement, a sharing of memory and purpose rather than a possession. Back at their hotel that evening, Elena found Gabriel at his laptop, working intently on a website design far more sophisticated than anything she'd seen him create before. "What are you working on?" she asked, sitting beside him on the bed. The Catalogue of Young Witnesses," Gabriel replied without looking up. "The project Carlo didn't finish. I can do it now." "Gabriel," Elena said carefully, "do you feel like yourself, or do you feel like you're becoming someone else?" Gabriel paused, considering the question seriously. "Both," he finally said. "I'm still me. I still love the same games, the same books, the same pizza toppings. I still hate math homework and still want a dog for Christmas." He smiled, looking very much like her 12-year-old son. "But I also remember being Carlo. I remember his life, his thoughts, his feelings." He touched his chest. "Oh, it's like having two hearts beating inside me sometimes." The next morning, they returned to the sanctuary for another meeting, this time with a surprise guest, Antonia Salzano, Carlo's mother. When she entered the room, her eyes immediately fixed on Gabriel, widening with an emotion Elena couldn't quite read. Gabriel stood frozen, staring at Antonia with a complex mixture of recognition, joy, and hesitation on his face. "May I speak with him alone?" Antonia asked quietly. Just for a few minutes." After Elena's nervous consent, Gabriel and Carlo's mother walked to a small side chapel, visible through a glass partition but offering privacy for their conversation. Elena watched as they sat side by side on a wooden pew, Antonia gently taking Gabriel's hand in hers. 20 minutes later, they returned. Antonia's eyes were red-rimmed, but she was smiling. Gabriel looked somehow lighter, as if a burden had been lifted. "Your son has a gift," Antonia told Elena and Marco. "A profound gift. He knew things only Carlo could know. Private jokes between us, conversations we had in our kitchen late at night, even the lullaby I used to sing when he was small." She took a deep breath. "I don't understand how this is possible, but I believe your son has been given a mission to continue Carlo's work." Father Lombardi cleared his throat. "Gabriel has made another claim that we would like to investigate. He says there is a diary, a private spiritual journal that Carlo kept, which contains his deepest spiritual reflections. According to Gabriel, Carlo hid this diary in a compartment near the urn where his body rests, with the intention that it would be found when the time was right." Father Ricci looked stunned. "Father Daniele never mentioned this." "Carlo asked him not to," Gabriel explained. "He said the diary should only be found when someone came who could continue his mission." He looked down at his hands. I think that's why I'm here. Why I remember being him." Father Lombardi spoke. "Don't I believe we should investigate. If the diary exists where Gabriel says it does, it would be compelling evidence." They waited until the sanctuary closed to visitors that evening. As twilight deepened the blues and golds of the stained glass windows, Father Ricci led their small group to the side chapel where Carlo's tomb was displayed. Gabriel approached the glass case reverently, placing his palm against it briefly before moving to the left side of the memorial. "There," he said, pointing to a decorative wooden panel that formed part of the display. "Behind that panel. It's not locked or sealed, just pressure fitted into place." Father Ricci examined the panel skeptically, but after gentle pressure, it gave way, revealing a small recess behind it. Inside lay a slim, leather-bound book, and a USB drive similar to the one they had found beneath the altar. Antonia gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "That's Carlo's journal. I bought him that leather notebook for his 14th birthday." Father Ricci carefully removed both items. He passed the journal to Father Lombardi, who opened it cautiously. "It's Carlo's handwriting," Antonia confirmed, looking over his shoulder. "I would recognize it anywhere." The journal contained deeply personal spiritual reflections, plans for future website projects, and insights about the Church's need to embrace technology as an evangelical tool. The final entry, dated just days before Carlo's death, was particularly striking. "I know my time is short now, but God's work continues. I believe He will send someone to complete what I've begun, perhaps years from now, when the Church needs it most. To whoever finds this journal, the password for the accompanying drive is Eucharist Chart Highway Saturchuhai 2026. It contains the framework for a project greater than anything I've created before, a digital pilgrimage through salvation history, centered on Christ's real presence in the Eucharist. This is my final gift to the Church I love." Gabriel watched calmly as the adults read this passage, his expression serene. When Father Lombardi looked up at him questioningly, he simply nodded. "I already knew what it said." They returned to the conference room, where Father Ricci connected the USB drive to his laptop. Using the password from the journal, he accessed its contents: detailed website designs, coding frameworks, and content outlines for a comprehensive digital platform. The timestamp on the files showed they had been last modified in September 2006, 1 month before Carlo's death. "This is extraordinary," Father Lombardi murmured. But the technological vision here was years ahead of its time, especially for 2006, and the theological content is remarkably sophisticated. Carlo understood that the digital world would become a primary mission field for the Church, Antonia said softly. "He always said the Internet could be a vehicle for grace if used properly." Gabriel, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. "The project isn't just about Eucharistic miracles. It's about creating a digital path to faith for people who live their lives online." Carlo saw that the Church was losing young people to digital distractions, so he wanted to transform those distractions into pathways to God. As the night deepened, the adults discussed the theological implications of what they had discovered, while Gabriel grew increasingly tired, eventually falling asleep in a chair by the window. Elena watched her son's peaceful face, noting how in sleep he looked entirely like her 12-year-old boy again. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. Father Lombardi considered her question carefully. "That depends partly on you and your husband, as Gabriel's parents, and partly on the Church authorities, who will need to evaluate everything we've found." "And Gabriel?" Marco pressed. "What happens to him?" "From what we've seen, Gabriel retains his own personality and identity," Father Lombardi replied. "This isn't a case of possession or displacement. It's more like a spiritual inheritance, a passing of memories and mission from one soul to another." "But why?" Elena asked, the question that had been haunting her. "Why Gabriel? Why our son?" It was Antonia who answered, her voice gentle but certain. Carlo always had a special insight into God's timing. If his memories and mission have been given to Gabriel, there must be a divine purpose. The following morning, Gabriel asked to spend time alone at Carlo's tomb before they departed. His parents and the others watched from a distance as he knelt in prayer, his lips moving silently, occasionally reaching out to touch the glass separating him from Carlo's preserved body. After nearly an hour, Gabriel rejoined them, His expression transformed, peaceful yet somehow more mature, as if he had come to some important understanding. "I know why now," he said simply. "Why what, sweetheart?" Elena asked. "Why I have these memories. Why it had to be me." He took a deep breath. Carlo couldn't finish his work because his time ran out. But he saw what was coming. How technology would change everything. How young people would need guidance in the digital world. Gabriel's eyes shone with conviction. "I can continue what he started, but in this new time, with new tools. It's like a relay race. He carried the baton as far as he could, and now it's my turn." Father Lombardi nodded thoughtfully. "And the diary and USB drive, they were left as markers for you to find." "Yes," Gabriel confirmed. Carlo knew someone would come who would understand their importance. He just didn't know who or when. The decision about how to proceed was not made quickly or lightly. After consultations with Vatican officials, it was agreed that Gabriel would work with a small team of theological and technical advisors to develop the project outlined in Carlo's final plans. The Moretti family returned to Rome with a new sense of purpose. Elena and Marco gradually came to accept the unique role their son seemed destined to play. They set clear boundaries to ensure Gabriel maintained a normal childhood, regular school attendance, time with friends, participation in sports, and limits on his computer time, while still supporting his special mission. Gabriel, for his part, found increasing balance between his identity as a normal 12-year-old boy and his connection to Carlo's legacy. The episodes where he spoke or acted distinctly like Carlo became less jarring and more integrated into his personality. He explained it to his parents as having access to another library of memories that he could reference without being overwhelmed by them. 6 months later, the first phase of the digital project was quietly launched, an interactive platform called Eucharistic Pathways that combined Carlo's original vision with contemporary technologies. The Vatican hosted the platform, presenting it as inspired by Carlo Acutis's work, but implemented by a team of developers. Gabriel's involvement remained confidential by mutual agreement, protecting him from unwanted publicity. On the anniversary of Carlo's beatification, Gabriel and his parents returned to Assisi for a private ceremony. Antonia Salzano was there, along with Father Lombardi and several Vatican officials who had become involved in the project. After the formal prayers, Gabriel approached Carlo's tomb alone. Those watching saw him place his hand on the glass, bow his head briefly, and then turn away with a smile of quiet satisfaction. "He's at peace," Gabriel told Antonia afterward. "He knows his work continues." As the years passed, Gabriel grew into a thoughtful teenager with a remarkable ability to bridge the worlds of faith and technology. The memories of Carlo's life remained with him, but increasingly as background context rather than foreground experience. On his 15th birthday, the age Carlo had been at his death, Gabriel experienced a particularly vivid dream. In it, he saw Carlo not as he appeared in the glass tomb in Assisi, but as he might have looked had he lived, a young man in his late 20s, smiling with approval. "The relay continues," Dream Carlo said. "You've carried it farther than I could have imagined." Gabriel woke with tears on his face, but joy in his heart. He understood now that his connection to Carlo had never been about merely duplicating what had come before, but about extending the vision into new territories Carlo could never have reached. The Church eventually established a special commission to study Gabriel's case, alongside other instances of what they termed spiritual memory transmission. While no official theological position was taken, many scholars came to see these rare occurrences as examples of God's ongoing work in the world. The divine purpose, finding expression through human vessels across generations,